we don't know what LLMs can do yet. We haven't been playing around with them long enough. So half of the power that LLMs are going to have is not even going to come from LLMs getting better. It's just going to literally come from us learning how to use them better. And the question I always try to ask tech folks, although this question is getting a little old for the young tech folks, they won't get it, but you'll get it, is Gmail like revolutionized web apps, right? It was the first widely scaled web app, and it kind of opened the door to everyone realizing, holy shit, like you could really use web browsers to make awesome software. And no one's been able to tell me exactly what was the delta in time between when browsers could support a product like Gmail and when Gmail was invented. It wasn't 1 second. And so this idea that like we get a new technology and we know how to use it immediately is like crazy. It is never true. And so I will kind of warn the consumers of technology, like if something doesn't work, like don't assume it's never gonna work. Like at these moments in time, you should probably assume it will work and you should be checking back in constantly.
Welcome to Tools for Tech Leaders, a podcast for C-suite executives and tech decision makers. I'm your host, Ian Tien, CEO and co-founder of Mattermost, and today we're thrilled to be joined by Michael Seibel, partner emeritus at Combinator and one of the most influential figures in the startup ecosystem. The world is rapidly changing with AI, technology, and innovation shaping our everyday lives. Michael is someone who's been an entrepreneur and supported thousands of founders, and we're really excited to have him on the show today. Michael, welcome to the show. It's such a pleasure to have you.
Thanks for having me. It's going to be fun.
Yeah. So, there's sort of like, how do you build a company? How do you found a company? But I think one of the most amazing things Y Combinator does, especially when I was going through it, is help coach and guide some of these early founders. And some people come with like really strong domain expertise or technical know-how or just build software, and there's all sorts of backgrounds. I love just to start off like, okay, you've got such an immense set of energy and great people. Like, how do you approach sort of this concept, this office hour, this taking time and be able to speak with folks and sort of help them sort of shape the future of their companies?
When I think about office hours, I first remember back when I was a founder, and I try to think about the time I was a founder and channel what percentage of time was I thinking about things that mattered and what percentage of the time was I worried about things that didn't. And so to me, the kind of first goal of the office hour is to make sure we're talking about the right thing. And all too often, redirecting the office hour is like my first job. Like, is this really a top priority? Is this something you really should be worried about? Is my first thought. The second thought I always have is that office hours have the potential to change the trajectory of a company. So a former YC partner, a guy named Paul Buchheit, who invented Gmail, he changed the trajectory of both of my companies. So with Twitch, he did office hours with Kyle Vogt, one of our co-founders. And through that conversation, Kyle was convinced that he could build the entire video streaming system internally. And that created the core technology that made Twitch what it is today. With SocialCam, my second company, Paul Buchheit spoke to us and we talked through a challenge we were having about how we could go viral. And through that conversation, he unlocked something and we were able to get 30 to 40 million people to download our app within 3 to 4 months. And so it's like, that's the kind of last thought. It's like, hey, make an impact. Like, like try to actually talk about the right thing and try to actually figure out how to make an impact. And I think what's interesting about office hours is like, it's not therapy. Like volume isn't the purpose here. And it's not either attaboys or gotchas. It's not like, let's marinate on what you did wrong or like, let's just celebrate all the good things you're doing. It's really like, can we talk about the most important issue and potentially unlock something that can change the trajectory of your company?
Yeah, that's amazing. So many questions. So maybe the first one, I'm so curious about like how you do it, how people can build that skill. But maybe the first question is, you've got all these really talented people, yourself included, right? Like, why, like, is there a way to office hours yourself? Like, is there a way, there's coaching and there's self-coaching. Is it something that you actually have to get outside of yourself and it's only effective in office hours? Or is there some way that you can sort of reproduce office hours sort of in your own mind?
I think it's really important to do it with someone else. But for example, for years at YC, Dalton and I would do it with each other about YC. Like, what would we tell ourselves in office hours about this? And so I think you can put that in yourself in that mindset. But I think it's really easy. It's much easier to do it with someone else than to do it purely in your own head. Because I think that, you know, a little bit of office hours, a little bit of the power of office hours is you're doing it with someone who doesn't have the full context of your business. And that's a benefit. All too often, founders try to like download all the context. And it's kind of like, that's actually not what you want. Like, you want someone coming in with a bit of a fresh mind, with a bit of like childlike assumptions. Because probably one of the core assumptions you have about your business is wrong. And that's probably something that's preventing you from executing as well as you could. So you don't want to just download all your assumptions onto someone else and then they're going to have all the same reasoning that you're going to have. So I'll say that, like, can you do it internally? Like, do you need a Michael Seibel to do office hours? Absolutely not. Can you do it in your own brain? That's a even more incredible skill. I think you could do it with your co-founder. I think you could do it with a close friend, a partner. You don't need me.
Yeah, I'll remember when I was at YC, which was quite a while ago, we were doing video games. I know we're very different right now. And it was Paul Graham that was like walking around like the Mountain View sort of campus.
Yeah.
And, and he was like, it was kind of started, it was 3 months. It was like, we started a company for like 3 months. We're like 3 weeks into YC. And he's like, we're doing video games. He thinks, I think you should shut down your business and do something else. Right. I'm like, why did you invest in us? And he's like, well, you're going to have like one game, looks like it's making money. It's going to be really hard to do a second. Even if you do a second, you really can't do a third. It's a hits driven business with no recurring revenue. And like, ultimately it's not going to scale. Right. And I was like, and I imagine a number of YC, like, the first thing with Paul Graham's like, well, I think Paul PG is wrong. Like, I could do this. And he was completely right. It took us like 3 years to figure out how right he was. And I'm like, and exactly as you described, he's got no context in video games, right? Like Gary understood games a lot more.
Yeah.
Um, but it was very, but it was just, so how did he, like, did PG teach this? Like, do you learn it from others? Do you have like a cohort? Like, where did this kind of come from? And how did all the partners get sort of like good at it?
So I would say this. I think there's a secret advantage that you get at YC. And I was talking to a VC about this the other day. And it was like, I've either funded or been in the room while these companies have been funded, 1,000 companies. And so the volume of reps that a YC partner can get. And then I worked at YC for 12 and a half years investing in companies. But then I did YC in 2007 and 2012. So 18 years of like startup context and 1,000 investment reps. You would ask the question differently. Like, why aren't you better? Like, why aren't you smarter? Like, why aren't you better at this? As opposed to a VC might invest in 30 companies in their whole career. And yes, they get pitched by thousands, but like, we get to see what happens to thousands. And so I will say that, like, people talk about pattern recognition in VC, and there is certainly pattern recognition within the YC community. Like, you would be shocked how often I'm talking to a founder and all I'm thinking about is like, yeah, these 6 people tried to do this before. And if you don't know something that they don't, or if you're not trying to do it in some weird different way, why would we expect a different outcome unless somehow the environment's changed, right? There's a massive new technology or a massive new consumer movement. Like, but if none of the variables have changed, like, why would the output change? And so I think that where this really comes up a lot is in interviews. Like, I pride myself in YC interviews of asking the hardest question that highlights the biggest potential problem in the business. And oftentimes people are like, how did you figure out where to like press? Like you press on the point that like we're screwed on. And it's like, once again, I'm not that smart. You invest in a lot of companies, like you learn from their mistakes. And I think that's kind of a secret advantage of YC is that so many reps means that like a typical group partner has so many other companies that they're condensing knowledge from and presenting to you. And that's very different from first principles thinking. I think people call it first principles thinking. It's not true. Like, it's almost the exact opposite. We have more data points. Um, Now that can be dangerous, right? AI happens and suddenly the things you thought you knew, you have to kind of put away. Um, but certainly within a cycle, it's very helpful.
Yeah, thank you. So maybe just kind of moving on to that, this concept of sort of like, technology is transformations, right? We had that in mobile, we had that in, I guess we're having that in AI right now. You had it in, sort of blockchain things. When you look at AI, how do you apply that? And this is just not only for YC, but just generally, it's like, okay, how do you sort of model what AI can be, and how do you figure out what's on the other side of it? And how do you do your office hours, or just outside of office hours, how do you do your sort of like analysis of the business and where to focus in a technology that like is people haven't seen before, that seems to change every like 2 seconds?
So I think the most important thing is actually just to throw away the old assumptions. So I'm lucky because in my startup career, I got to see two of these, web apps and mobile. And um, as a founder, what was so funny was the investors that I was pitching had all these assumptions about how the world worked based on the past. And I was taking advantage of a new way. So I remember always just being pissed. Like, I remember having this pitching, we pitched Excel, and I was in this pitch meeting explaining why video ads were going to be how we monetize Twitch. And the VC was like, people have been talking about video ads coming on the internet for 10 years. Like, it ain't going to happen. And I'm like, it seems inconceivable that we would have video ads on television, yet somehow the internet would never, like, it just, and like anyone listening to this now would just be like, that is the craziest thing. But think about it. People have been promising that investor probably for 10 years video ads are going to happen. And here's the next founder coming in and promising, and it turns out time changed. The next founder was right. It was the previous ones maybe were wrong. And so, to me, the most important thing when you have the technology change is to kind of like go back to when you're a founder and like throw away your assumptions. I think the next most important thing is it's even more important to just invest in the team because we don't know what AI is going to be. So the chances of someone pivoting is super high. So trying to dig deep on like, oh, it's this specific B2B SaaS and this person worked in this field for 7 years and they're solving a personal problem. That's nice too. But like, 3 23-year-olds who are screwing around with AI tools, that's also good. Um, and then I think the last thing that I wish I did more of early was use the tools myself. I think that there was this really interesting moment in my last 3 years of YC where, like, 3 years ago, the promise of AI was there, but products weren't good enough. And about 8 months ago, um, products got really good. The foundation models got good enough that you could actually build good products with them. And I feel like I was consuming that secondhand through my founders. Whereas like the products were all consumer, like I could have been consuming it myself and I probably have had more perspective.
Yeah, 100%. I think, so today is May 8th while recording this. It'll be a few weeks before this actually comes out. So whatever we're talking about is going to be like ancient history. Um, and I do follow you on Twitter, and it sounds like you're making some agents and doing some trainings. I'm just and I'm asking this question in the context that we work with a lot of organizations. I mean, it's not just in the like Silicon Valley is ahead of everyone else, but like I work with a lot of organizations that really can't see the future or are waiting for the future to arrive. And I'm just curious, like, what have you seen that sort of like wowed you in the last sort of few months that makes you throw away your assumptions, as opposed like what is the examples of things that make you throw away your assumptions versus adjust your assumptions?
Well, I'm going to take the question in a slightly different direction because in the last month or so, I've been spending a lot more time learning about government and talking to people who operate in government at uh, local, state, and federal. And what's really clicked for me, and I don't think AI is quite there, but it's like getting damn close. What's really clicked for me is that I had no idea what it was like working in government. And I would talk to civil servants who are really dedicated and really smart. And they basically would explain there are infinite rules. There are infinite rules. There are infinite guidelines on how to follow those rules. Rules never go away, they're only added. And I've made this deal to do public service, and that deal gives me some benefits, right? Um, it's probably slightly harder for me to get fired. I get a great pension. It comes with some costs. I make less than a private wage. And the only thing that screws that deal up is if I break the law. And I'm sitting here in a sea of laws that no one human is smart enough to understand. And I heard that story at every level of government, and like everything clicked. It was like, well, woof, I would never like, and then run America, right? Like, like make everything work. Like, it's like, oh God. And it's tricky because I think that like people describe bureaucracy and everyone kind of feels like they understand what that means. But like, I never kind of understood that the bureaucracy is the victim. Like the people in government are the number one victim. They're not like the persecutor. Like they're not committing the crime. Like they're the victim. And the fact they can get anything done is crazy. And where LLMs come is really interesting because like you could never train a lawyer on all of the rules and all of the guidelines. You can train an LLM on them. And even more crazy, the rules oftentimes are public, right? Like that's kind of a cool thing about our government. Like, you write shit down and let everyone read it. So like, that's really interesting. So a government worker could have the best lawyer on earth at their beck and call 24 hours a day. And I think that's something that's inconceivable to people. And then furthermore, even if you know the rules, the actual kind of grind of the paperwork, like you have to send this person this memo and fill out this form and go to this website and da-da-da-da. So like, let's call that the admin work. On your other shoulder could be the best admin in the world. And I think to myself, what could these civil servants do with the best lawyer in one shoulder and the best admin on the other? And like, they would be massively empowering. And what's so interesting is when I talk to people in government about this, their first thought is like, let's use LLM to simplify the laws. And I'm like, yeah, exactly. You know what the solution is? Use LLMs to make more laws. Like, that'll definitely do it, right? And I'm just like, no. It seems like we have enough laws. I think people can't imagine that an LLM could understand them all. And I think that's what I want to get people's head around. It's like, wow, if an LLM could understand them all, suddenly the major question a civil servant has to answer is this thing I'm doing going to be good? As opposed to the major questions I think they're spending most of their time on is it legal? And how do I even attempt to do it? And if we can shift it to like, is it good? Oh man, I think we can unlock so much stuff. So I think the opportunities are huge. And I think that weirdly, the public government is so primed for this because it's so public and so text-based and so rules-based. Like LLMs love that shit. Like it's maybe even more so than other industries.
Yeah, I love that. I actually, I went to grad school for public policy and computer science, and they're kind of the same thing. It's a bunch of rules that run, nations or municipalities, right? Versus sort of computers, but it's same like text-based architecture, and
Yes.
it's like there's not even diagrams, right? It's just all text.
No.
And it's like they don't have, and it's like they're working on like very bad like the very bad interpretation of what that is, but it's all open source, right? All the laws are very open. So And you mentioned something that was is it just in the process of envisioning a new technology and the transformation of what's ahead. You mentioned it unlocks a lot. So how do you think about what that new world could look like? How do you do that divergent thinking and saying, okay, in this new world post
Yeah.
this, what happens?
So I think that for the first time, I think a very good critique of government is it's not structured to assume its solutions are incorrect and to iterate them to correct. It's more structured to assume that its solutions are well researched and correct, and then to move on to the next problem. Which, like, when you zoom all the way in, it's like, well, we consulted these PhDs and these experts and da 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 da, right? Like, you could understand that argument. But then when you zoom out at the like history of failed policies, you're like, obviously, just because a PhD is involved doesn't mean they can tell the future. Like, it's hard to make good public policy. So what I hope in LLM, to me, the kind of second part of this to make government better is what I was saying about a focus on results and iteration. Like, I feel like if we could take the effort out of getting things done, we can spend more time thinking about, is it working? Is this public policy working? Is this social safety net helping the right people? Is it having the desired result? If not, how do we change it? And I think that, like, that, if the government can kind of unclog itself, ideally it can iterate faster. And in my experience in the corporate world, it's like nobody nails it on the first try. It's always about iteration. And if the government can, I don't think the government should take on 10x more new big projects. I just think if it could iterate 10x faster, wow. Like, one of the issues in government is just how long it takes to implement public policy and like how relatively short a political term is. What if we could iterate programs every year? Right? Like that doesn't seem crazy. Like in the public and in private sector, that's like kind of slow. like, um, but if we could iterate things every year, a president could get 4 iteration cycles. Like, holy crap! Like, a senator could get 6 iteration cycles. Like, so many interesting things could happen if we could iterate faster. So, what I'm hoping is that LLMs are that type of unlock. And I think that we're really close, like very, very close to that lawyer and that admin being on one shoulder or the other.
Yep, excellent. I think this is certainly for a lot of folks we talk to on policy and government, that this is something that's on their minds. When you think about this sort of like cross-functional, cross-disciplinary work, you've got so for example, when you do a policy, let's say it's on the electric grid, right? You're bringing in PhDs who understand power. You're bringing in industry. You're having a lot of roundtables to educate the policymakers, and you bring constituents in. So it's very very cross functional. How do you think about these folks that have to work through the regulations and shape the so there's people that shape the policy, there's people who actually have to get the work done, and it's very multidisciplinary. How do you think about, like, is it training them up? Is it just making tools available? Is it having forums? Like, how do you get these folks that this is the history of how they've always done things, and there's sort of a new way to do things? What are some options to actually move that forward together?
I'm actually not worried so much about that because I think I've seen over and over again when products are significantly better, people adopt them at almost every age group. And when products aren't, people don't. And so to give you an example, if we were going to research, an electricity grid question, in a pre-LLM world, do you even have access to the best experts? Do they have to come in? Do you have to schedule meetings with them? You have to bring them in for public testimony. How long does that take? Versus an LLM that can read every paper from every expert on electricity grids that's ever been written, that can look at every interview that those experts have done, that can read every book. In my mind, it's going to be far easier to get someone's expertise by asking an LLM to consume all the material they've ever created and provide the expertise than to get the human to do that. Hilariously, I don't even think humans are good at communicating their own expertise, right? Especially if you've been an expert in something for 30 years. One shot, let me make sure I'm absolutely give you the exact thing you need. That's hard. So I think we're gonna be living in this world where information is far more accessible. And I what I would hope is that that would make people who are creating policies smarter and move faster. But to be completely honest, and this is where maybe I kind of have kind of a weird maybe disagreement with some. Um, it is not obvious to me that the correct way to run a government like ours is to have very, very strict rules. To me, the legislative branch should be much more of an oversight branch and like a high level kind of like directionally, this is what we want to accomplish, and here's some ways you think about accomplishing it. And the executive branch should have the responsibility of actually accomplishing it. And the idea that like something is wrong, so we have to write a law before we fix it, scares the crap out of me. Versus like the laws are more communicating what our goals are. And then we can iterate towards those goals. I think when the laws are communicating how to do something, and I spoke to this great public servant woman named Jen Palka, and it was really funny because she was saying that like legislature has figured this out. They figured out when they prescribe too many things in the law, and then that law's 20 years old, they handicap the people who are trying to implement it. So they've started to remove things, and they've started to say like, for example, you could do this, or we suggest you consider this, but you don't have to do it. And then the executive branch takes those as rules and says, oh, we have to do it. And it's like, no, I think the legislative branch is starting to realize like you have to give people the flexibility to figure out what the right answers are, and you can't be too prescriptive. So it's not obvious to me that our problem is that we're not making like new laws well. So maybe said differently, I wouldn't maybe mind if we're making fewer laws. Let's give the executive branch a little bit of time to execute on its current responsibilities better than it does. There's quite a bit of a gap there. We might already have, there might be 2 or 3x benefit in the laws we already have if they were implemented well. Let's absorb some of that.
Yeah, 100%. There's a lot to unpack there. Maybe we can take it in pieces. When you think about, let's talk about the first of all, new ways of doing things that are more efficient, right? So executive branch, how do you execute like things being out of date? So it's like, hey, all these laws. I mean, I think the big thing in that we see globally is the EU AI Act, which has been very heavy handed on AI. And this is a world that I think is a little bit more open. So that's maybe an example of regulations and technology. Maybe just to click down a little bit for context, when we say that AI is changing things, I think there's a lot of people that haven't seen that. They've seen the ChatGPT and it does homework and it does, these one or two things, but they haven't seen it. But it sounds like in the last few months, it's been really productionized where we can really see it's like overcoming some of these assumed like ceilings. What have you sort of what were maybe stories or things that you've seen that just really changed your mind? What was like the tipping point of maybe a demo or a story or a company that you're like, "Oh crap, like all those assumptions delete and now this is really unlocking."
So at YC, we funded a healthcare company, and this company provides primary care to elderly people in their nursing home or their residential facility. So instead of your grandma having to be driven to go see the doctor and probably only seeing the doctor once or twice a year, this service replaces her doctor and can come to see her in her home. And what was so cool about this service is that people don't realize that nursing homes don't have medical staff. So it happened, and this story is so common. Someone has trouble peeing. They don't say anything. It gets worse. They get a fever. They go into sepsis. They don't show up for breakfast in the morning. The nursing home staff finds them, calls the ambulance, emergency room visit, maybe for 2 weeks, maybe for a month. IV antibiotics, blah, 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 blah. Urinary tract infections is like a top 3 spend in America for elderly healthcare. If you catch it early, it's a $6 pill. Right? And so that was an example of the type of thing that this company could catch early, because they would call your grandma once a week and they would ask her how she's feeling. And if something went wrong, they could send a doctor out within the next week, and they would catch these things way early. But it was expensive. They had to not only have software developers building their software and nurse practitioners and doctors seeing patients, they had to have this huge army of operations staff to help submit paperwork to insurance, to help order various labs and so on and so forth, to help direct the nurse practitioners to their appointments, to collect notes and medical records and all this. Just a huge army of people. And about halfway through last year, things changed. Halfway through last year, this company figured out that they could use AI, and the result was startling. So, one, instead of a nurse practitioner having to spend an hour taking notes, she could record the visit, and then the notes would actually be taken for her, and the electronic medical record would be set up for her, and all she'd have to do is scan it, check for any issues, and approve it. So that nurse practitioners went from 4 visits a day to 10 visits a day, which meant that your grandma could be seen faster, which means that they could catch health issues earlier, which means your grandma was healthier. They could submit all the documents to insurance without an army of humans either, which meant that the company got paid faster. And so the result of being able to insert AI into these kind of sticky human operations tasks was that the company went from losing money every patient to making money every patient and provided better healthcare. Like, that's essential, right? Like, usually when like a medical system makes more money, they provide worse healthcare. Like, that's the deal. Like this is the first time I've ever seen it where it was like cost less money, better healthcare. That's just one example. I saw another company, and they provide businesses small business loans. And they have a whole underwriting department to do it. And it would often take up to a week to underwrite your small business for a loan. And they've been doing it for years. And they wanted to do a deal with a large national retailer who has a lot of business customers. And that national retailer wanted to integrate this product and wanted to enable businesses to get a loan instantly. So you submit the paperwork right now on checkout. We can underwrite you and approve you for a loan or not right now. Couldn't do that with humans. They had all of this training data from all of the underwriting they'd done for years. They saw, oh crap, maybe we can use AI to do it. It did. So now suddenly, as that small business, you can operate faster, you can do more work, you can deliver your work faster, you can make more money. Your customer gets their renovation done faster. Like, once again, it's this weird, like, there's no loser. Like, there's only winners. And so that's just 2 examples. There have been a ton. And I think what's really cool about what I want to warn people about is that whenever technology is new, I think that people will try it. And if it doesn't work, they kind of assume that it's static, like it just doesn't work. Or if it can't do something right now, they assume it will always not be able to do something. And I will tell you that, like, we don't know what LLMs can do yet. We haven't been playing around with them long enough. So half of the power that LLMs are going to have is not even going to come from LLMs getting better. It's just going to literally come from us learning how to use them better. And, the question I always try to ask tech folks, although this question is getting a little old for the young tech folks, they won't get it, but you'll get it, is, Gmail like revolutionized web apps, right? It was the first widely scaled web app. And it kind of opened the door to everyone realizing, holy shit, like you could really use web browsers to make awesome software. And no one's been able to tell me exactly what was the delta in time between when browsers could support a product like Gmail and when Gmail was invented. It wasn't 1 second. Like we live, and so this idea that like we get a new technology and we know how to use it immediately is like crazy. It is never true. And so I will kind of warn the consumers of technology, like if something doesn't work, like don't assume it's never going to work. Like in these moments in time, you should probably assume it will work and you should be checking back in constantly.
Yeah, 100%. I feel like that's a mistake a lot of these companies that get displaced make, is that they don't, like, there's that history, they project the history into the future. So this one with LLMs is a little different than the other transitions. Web app, mobile, blockchain. You have very sophisticated, very technical people. The examples that you just shared were kind of replacing domain expertise, right? Whether it's nurses or financial, financial research, credit checks, domain expertise with LLMs. Do you think that, and it's, how do you think about,
I think this is the weird thing. I don't think it's domain expertise. It didn't replace the nurse in that example. It helped her take notes faster. It didn't replace the person at that lending company who's making the lending policies. It replaced the person who had to read all of those documents and see if your business matched their lending policies. Said differently, I think one of the things I've noticed is that people kind of assume that white collar and knowledge work are the same thing. And I think that that's not true. I think that so many companies in America are basically full of white collar factory workers, like smart people whose brains are not being used, like who are effectively doing rote, non-creative, non-knowledge work because the software they're using is too dumb. And so I wonder how we're going to be able to use all these smart people when we no longer have to use them for like as basically human automatons doing like brainless work. And I think this is the interesting thing. I think a lot of people are like, oh, all the jobs are going to be lost. And I'm just like, what are all the jobs that are going to be created when you can finally use your brain at your job? And like, how many people feel like they use their brain 20% of the time, 10% of the time? And 90% of the time, inbox, outbox, filling out a form. So I actually think that's what's so interesting is that it's not that the AI replaces the expertise. I don't know that I would ask the AI to design an underwriting system, but it replaces the shit rote work. Now, some people will say soon the AI will be able to, replace all the expertise. Yeah, maybe. Sure. I was like, right now, the rote work is what's going to be attacked.
Yeah, that makes a total, yes, 100%. I think 20 years ago when I was in that information worker space, they were called, like, they're called knowledge workers. I think that was from like Forrester, but the name was structured task worker, right?
White collar factory
Yeah.
worker.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it seems like a lot of the opportunity is to take that, that structured task worker, that factory worker, that sort of like less creative, and sort of replace it. When you think about that next generation of founders, do you still think that it's that really smart, like technical, like deep person that can do it? Or do you think that there's an opportunity for folks that come from these regulated domains to like career shift and say, hey, I'm going to leave government, I'm going to go build that? Or is that just too far a
I'll say this.
bridge?
I
Yeah.
think one of the cool things about AI is it certainly enables individuals to create tools that can help themselves way easier. So I think at the point where like a non-technical person wants to solve a simple problem for themselves, they can do it. I'll give you a simple example, right? This is like a shitty example, but it's simple. I had contacts in like 6 different email and messaging products and I wanted to condense them into one canonical list and then upload that back. So I had like all my contacts in one place. And I spent 20 minutes searching Google and was like, oh, these kind of weird products. Are they going to work? Are they going to steal my contacts? Like, I don't know. And then I used a company called Replit and just built my own contact syncer in like 20 minutes. And it was really funny because you build the whole thing and then you have the demo product there. And then I uploaded all my contact files and it made a master one. And then they're like, do you want to launch this? I'm like, no, I'm done. Like, throw it away. Like, so I do think that like kind of individualized tools that can help you with small tasks is like right at your fingertips. What I don't believe is that like a business person with expertise can kind of vibe code $1 billion business. You know, I think the perfect example, I tried to create this municipal code lawyer product. I'm not a developer, and the version I made was like shit, but I tweeted about it, and like 6 or 7 developers emailed me their versions, and obviously they were like 100x better. And so I do think this is a situation where software developers are going to get a disproportionate amount of the advantage with these tools. A disproportionate amount. And it's funny because I talked to so many YC founders who are like, you know, are people even going to need us anymore? Like, can't you just vibe? I'm just like, yeah, no. But I do think like, you know, whereas when we were coming up, it went from a business person needed to hire someone to make a website till they didn't. I think now it's like a business person used to need to hire people to make like simple business tools. Now they won't. I think that's going to make a non-technical person far more powerful as well, but not enable them to create $1 billion business. I don't believe.
Yeah, totally makes sense. I'm gonna shift gears a little bit because I am super curious. Like, we both have kids, and I'm just wondering about like my own kids. I'm sort of like, okay, you've got, what's, what are, what are the? I definitely don't want them to turn out. Structured task workers are wonderful people. I'm sure they've got great things that they do in their lives. If I want to think about or people want to think about their kids in sort of like that new economy, what's coming up, right? Where these assumptions get deleted, where the world is really changing. I'm kind of curious that your friends, how do you think about sort of like early education for kids growing up, university, college? Like it's completely different than when we went through it.
So, you know, I was talking to my dad a little bit about this subject, and it was really weird because he said something to me that like really like messed with me. So, um, we apparently, I am the 3rd generation in my family of technology workers. And my dad was like, that is not common. Like, my grandpa was a researcher at IBM and then was a professor at Penn State, but always like, he taught my dad how to write code. My dad was like an engineer, a storage engineer in banking. And it was interesting because one of the things that unpacked is that every generation in our family got exposed to technology very young, and there was no fear. And, you know, I cannot remember a time in my life where we didn't have a computer. And I was born in 1982. So it's like, like most people, not most middle and upper middle class people by the 90s, mid to late 90s had computers at their homes. But like, I don't remember a time in our 80s when we didn't have a computer. And I think what that did for me was such a gift. There was never fear about technology. Technology was always a good thing. And I think that even though I wasn't a developer, that gift helped me so much when doing a tech startup, because I always thought of software and tech as like, it's going to help. And like so many people are kind of software and tech skeptical. And I was always like, yeah, obviously it's the savior. It's been the coolest thing in my life the whole time. And I think, my dad felt the same way. He had me when he was pretty young, and it was his comfort and technology and skills with technology. He had to go get a real job, and his first real job was as a database administrator. And so it's so weird to me now, I've got a 7-year-old son, and more likely than not, he'll be the fourth generation who's in technology. And so my natural inclination is just to do what was done for me, which is expose him and default lean into it versus be afraid of it. And so that results in, so to answer your question on those, I have no idea what he's going to be when he grows up. I have no idea whether college will be useful. I have no idea about any of that stuff. I do believe that being a technology lover will be the most valuable thing for him, because I think it was the most valuable thing for my grandpa and for my dad and for me. And so if I can make him love technology, that's what I care about. And so, he's had an iPhone or iPad since he was 9 months old. I have spent countless hours finding the highest quality apps for him to play with. I've locked down the devices so he can't get 99.9% of the shitty apps that try to extort kids and their parents. And most recently, he's become a ChatGPT user. And watching that has been incredible. He has access to my ChatGPT Pro account, so I get to see all of his chats. And he is going to grow up as a native AI user, which is probably the biggest gift I can give him. And it's so interesting because so many YC founders I talk to act like giving their kids ChatGPT is like giving them a sharp knife. And I'm like, I'll debate you on YouTube. YouTube might very well be a sharp knife. He doesn't get YouTube. But man, ChatGPT, I don't see it. And the kind of stuff he does is, I wouldn't even considered it. Like, he's got a bunch of Legos. He's like, ChatGPT, help me build this castle I want to build. And it gives him instructions on how to do it. Or like, he's playing Minecraft now. Like, hey, ChatGPT, how do I do this? And it's like, I just love that he's going to have a native working relationship with AI, because I think that none of the limitations that I see, he's going to see. Like, none of the assumptions that I have, he's going to have. Like, he's going to default assume AI works. Whereas I think we live in this generation, we're going to default assume it doesn't. And that'll ultimately be our downfall. Like, that's why their generation will take over the reins.
Yeah, 100%. So it reminds me of a quote from like college, which is like, 1 year after an engineer graduates, you wish you took more sort of like engineering courses. 5 years, you wish you took more business courses. And like 10 years, you wish you took more philosophy courses. And I'm with you. Like, I had the computer when I was little. Like, my kids have computers. They made the mistake, so the YouTube is terrible, and I gotta, we gotta block it and fix some of those things. But I'm also curious about like the opposite argument. Not that you should be a Luddite, but like history and art and all those other things, and having sort of like, what does it mean to have like you just kind of mentioned earlier, which is kind of inconceivable. Will college actually be helpful, like in future, right? That's like a question now. And there was a time where college was about, rounding yourself out, like understanding the world. And I don't know, what do you think about what would be the sort of, if you worked on, so let's say you did the technology, but what else do you do, right? Like, what else do you do to see the rest of the things?
In my mind, technology hasn't been either or, right? So, for example, Jonathan has an app on his iPad that is called Brain Pop, and it's full of these like produced really fun videos about history, and like all of history and a lot of other subjects. It's kind of almost like a curated YouTube. And he consumes it voraciously. Like, he's told us about World War II and Axis and Allied powers, and he's told us about the civil rights movement. He's like, in many ways, I would say that, like, historically, kids would get access to information from school. And now that he has this technology, he can get access to information whenever the hell he wants to. Like, he doesn't have to wait to be taught something in school. So I would say his organic interests, like, because he's got access to technology, he can run with his organic instance, where history, art, whatever. Now, in terms of college, I have a weird relationship with college. I think college works on a lot of interesting cross purposes depending on kind of who you ask within the system. I think it is fairly helpful to have some kind of place that is like a halfway house between being a child and an adult. And, it's kind of like, it's not as padded as your home growing up, but it's not as sharp as the real world. And I do think that that is valuable independent of the education. Now, do I think it should cost as much as it does? No, that's fucking crazy how much it costs. But I do think that's extremely valuable. So that's number one. Number two, I think being around motivated peers is really valuable. And so I think that, like, it's tricky because I think some colleges don't do that. Some colleges do not create an environment where you're around motivated people. And I think that that kind of does people a disservice. And, sometimes people say, like, well, not as many people need to go to college as do. And I'll be like, maybe that's true. I don't know. But I do know that, like, it's a force multiplier when you're around a bunch of motivated people and you think to yourself, can I keep up? And college is really good for that. I think 3, college is less structured than high school. And so it allows you to do a little bit more free thinking. It's like, it's kind of probably the first time where really, like, you have to synthesize ideas yourself, which I think is really helpful, especially if you go into the private sector, because, like, that's kind of what you're going to have to be doing a lot of. So to me, I think all of those things are very valuable about college, and I don't know AI would change any of those things. What I don't like about college is that I feel as though too many colleges are exploitative businesses. Like, they're not delivering these benefits and they're charging a lot of money under the guise of a college diploma is a credential you need to be a member of the white collar working class. And it's like, that pains me. Like, that feels like a crime. And, but, like, I fully imagine that my kids are going to go to college, and yeah, maybe they're not going to get to go, like, maybe the reason why is not to study under some professor who's going to teach them a bunch of stuff, because they can consume that stuff whenever they wanted to. But those other benefits are, I think, far, far better. The last thing I'll say about college is that, like, I think it deserves a little bit of a rethink, because I think that, like, there's sometimes I feel as though, like, it's operating at these, like, aggressively cross purposes. I believe that, like, there's a set of professors who are trying to find people to follow in their footsteps and be academics. I feel like there's a set of administrators that are very focused on graduation rates and, like, first job. There's a set of development people who are very focused on, like, one day harvesting you for your money. Like, it's like this weird, like, and I actually wonder, like, I I wish that those groups could get on the same page a little bit more about what college really can do for people, because, like, I don't think it's any of those things. Like, I don't think college is the training ground for our next generation of academics, because I think that, like, 99.9% of the people who graduate college will never go into academia. So like, and ditto. I don't think your first job is the thing, and I don't think you becoming rich, you give money to university is the thing. And so like, I wish a little bit that the colleges would kind of reorient and be a little bit smarter about the service they're providing.
Yeah, thank you. We had this kind of like group of topics to talk about. We're running a little low on time, but I can't resist maybe going a little more into this conversation because it's so interesting. Because I'm one of the weird ones in the YC founders that actually came straight out of an MBA program into like YC. And
Uh-oh.
it's like, "Oh, wait, where are the other MBAs?" No, there are none. It's, no, but my co not but not only was that, it was both the co-founders of what Spin Punch was, it's now Mattermost. We were both MBAs. Now, we were both actually transitioning from technology into business, and, like, the way that you describe college is like, okay, it kind of applies to the MBA process. It's like you're in a halfway house between, being whatever you were before to trying to be an executive, right? And then you've got this motivated people. So if you hopefully pick the right one, I mean, it is expensive. So yes, you've got the motivation, and you've got that sort of unstructured time. That's actually one of the reasons. And part of it was I'm Canadian, so I need to get a green card. I needed health insurance. So like it was a great place to actually incubate. It was very expensive, but it was a great place to incubate, meet lots of people. And it's not definitely not the canonical, like, take on like, go spend a bunch of money, then go found a company.
Mhm.
Um, and, I think that I'm just kinda curious because there's, it's, "Hey, we got into YC." That was the important thing. But, like, do you have a opinion? You got college and you got the MBA, and you probably have, at least a sample, right, of those that were MBAs and those that weren't. I'm super curious about the patterns.
So I think that as much as we joke about MBAs being kind of useless in the startup world overall, and then specifically at YC, we still do fund some, and some have been some of our most famous founders. The DoorDash was started by MBA students. I think that my opinion on this got a lot more nuanced after watching my wife go through an MBA program, and I think my opinion became there's a group of people who are using MBAs for a specific purpose. And I think that's great. And it's their purpose. For my wife, it was really simple. To advance in her career at her firm, they required an MBA and they would pay for it. That's like, well, you should probably do that. But like, and like, maybe that rule is dumb, but it is the rule. So, okay, right? Um, I saw a lot of people in our MBA program who were kind of stuck on East Coast banking consulting world and wanted to break into tech. It was like, that's actually an interesting way of doing it. Like, the tech companies do recruit middle managers at the MBA programs, and like, okay. Your example, perfect example, like, there was a purpose. What I don't believe professional school is good at is helping you find your purpose. Whether it's business school or law school or med school. Um, And I think the folks that I saw go through her program that I didn't feel like were getting a good deal were the people who like didn't know what they wanted to get out of it before they did it. And or the people who were consuming the marketing of what the MBA was going to do. Um, and I think that marketing is just crap, right? And so like, I see MBA's marketing like, oh, this is like a birthplace for startups. And it's like, no, it's not. Why? You're not like plugged into the startup community when you're getting an MBA at all. And that's like a lie, right? Like, or we can teach you entrepreneurism. It's like, no, you can't. And like, certainly not to spend that much. Like, there's all this information online for free. So to me, like, that's where like things kind of get a little sideways. So I always kind of remind people the original purpose of the business school was to train middle and managers in corporate America. Like, no matter what they're marketing to you, like that is like the core job. Now, if you want to be a middle manager in corporate America, great. And if you can find a way to use the MBA to accomplish some other goal, great. But like, don't believe any marketing. Like, don't believe the marketing.
Yeah, 100%. So, yeah, thank you. I was just super curious because like it's like I just love the halfway house between like childhood and adulthood and the halfway house between like whatever you were before and whatever you come after. So maybe it's yeah, different, horses for courses. So maybe one last thing, we're gonna try this is a new to the podcast. We're gonna try like a rapid fire round if you're okay with that, and then
Let's do
we
it.
kind of close on
Rapid
that.
fire.
All right. So what's one book every entrepreneur or founder should read?
Oh God, that's a really hard question. Okay, I'm gonna cheat and give a couple. So Shogun, which is kind of a historical nonfiction book. Um, The Prize, which is a history of the oil industry. Um, the Rockefeller biography. Um, House of Morgan, which is kind of a history of the Morgan banking family. Um, and Hackers, which is kind of an early history of how computer science and software happened. Um, I think those are all great ones.
Dang, that's good. I got 2 and 3 of those 5, but, like, I've got now 3 to go. What's the most underrated skill of a founder?
Ooh, low expectations. I think the founders who are just happy to be doing their company, so when bad things happen, they don't like crush themselves. They're like, well, at least we're doing a company. Like, the alternative is I have a boss. Like, as long as like I'm winning, as long as I'm in the game, that vibe is so helpful.
Yeah, non-obvious. That makes sense. Um, Best piece of advice you've ever received?
A very practical one is that this incredible lawyer told me not to go to law school because she spent an hour describing what lawyers do. And I was like, that doesn't sound like fun at all. I don't want to do that. She's like, don't go to law school. That really helped me. Um, it's hard for me to come up with another one. It's weird. Like, I'm not big on mentors and like kind of core advice. Maybe I'd be better off if I was.
No, I thought about law school too. I think, I would that would not have been a great a thing for me. No, I was going for grad school once, and this professor, was asking him for advice, and he said this thing, which was, "Find it is what you." And this guy's Hiroshi Ishii at the MIT Media Lab. I didn't end up going there, but it's like find what it is in life that you love to do that you can't eat and you can't sleep, and then do that for the rest of your life.
Maybe this is what I will say. I think that I have stumbled, you know, metaphorically, drunkenly into a lot of good advice. Like, I think for me, advising founders was exactly that. But I didn't, unfortunately, I didn't receive that advice. I just kind of like stumbled into doing it and was smart enough to stick with stuff that I enjoyed.
Yep, 100%. Last couple, favorite productivity hack if you have one.
Yeah, I do. A to-do list. The number of YC founders that don't use a to-do list, like, always shocks the shit out of me. Um, and then the second one is a visual clipboard. On my computer in like the right sixth of the screen, there's always just like a flat text notepad always open. And it's just like this like visual clipboard I can just put shit in and just gets really long. And then like it ends up being extremely useful, strangely.
And maybe the last one to close on, what's a common belief about startups that you think is wrong? Like people just that's what they imagine.
That winners and losers are decided in a small number of years. That, y- this is a so much more of a long game, and especially young people, just like for a young person, the idea of working on something for 10 years is inconceivable, regardless of what they say. But like when you look at the timeline to make a successful company, 10 years is like the minimum. And I think that that's just really hard for people to get their minds around. It's like 10 years, really? It's like, yeah, that's the game we're in. But that should be really, really positive thing. 'Cause it's like that means there's a lot of time to fuck up. There's a lot of times to get things wrong. There are lots of opportunities to figure out how to win.
That's fantastic. Michael, thank you so much. This was a great conversation. Really, really appreciate it.
Thanks for having me.
Thanks so much for listening. If you like this content, please join our LinkedIn group. Please thumbs up, please comment, please subscribe. We'd love to bring more of this content to you.